The hills of Sicily. Everywhere ruined castles remind us that for thousands of years, invaders have visited terrible violence on this beautiful land. But beneath this castle at Agira is a lonely cemetery, a reminder of a bloody struggle of our time. Towards twilight, the birds always gather here, but the graves themselves are rarely visited.
This is Agira Canadian War Cemetery in Sicily, and it contains the graves of more than 500 Canadians killed in the Sicilian campaign. Sicily was Canada's first real battle of the Second World War, but it was only a taste of things to come. This is the grave of Company Sergeant Major Charles Nutley of the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment. He was killed 10th of July, 1943. He was the first Canadian to die in Sicily for king and country.
By the summer of 1943, the Second World War is in its fourth year. For almost all of that time, the men of the 1st Canadian Division have been parked in England, held back in reserve by the Canadian High Command, who are hoping for a major campaign where they can commit all of the 26,000 men. There are endless sports events.
They're off to a flying start in this year's 1st Corps Royal Canadian Army Service Corps sports meet.
Endless parades.
An inspection of the 1st Division of the Canadian Army was begun. The inspecting officer was Major General Guy Simmons.
And endless training.
It is an army which has played a long waiting game. An army highly trained and highly skilled.
While other Allied armies are in the fight, it seems as if the 1st Division has been forgotten. Training in England with the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment, the Hasty Peas, is 22-year-old Farley Mowat.
During the first week of June, the unit was granted 4 days' leave. Men streamed out from all points of the British Isles, knowing full well that this was their last opportunity to drink in English pubs, make love to English girls, and live, laugh, and be merry. For tomorrow, we go battle fighting.
But now, in the summer of 1943, they will get their chance to join the war. Now, it seems, they will no longer be the forgotten army. England, June 1943. 26,000 Canadian troops of the 1st Division board more than 50 ships and depart England. Part of a huge Allied invasion force that is finally going to strike back at the Axis powers in Europe. After years of waiting, the men are spoiling for a fight. Only the Canadian commander, Guy Simmons, knows their final destination. On board ship is 28-year-old Strome Galloway of the Royal Canadian Regiment.
Finally, on June 28th, we noticed that a large convoy was forming around our ship. We put to sea, and the next day at noon, a message was posted on all notice boards. It read, "Following message has been received from the Rear Admiral. We are on our way to the Mediterranean to take part in the greatest combined operation ever attempted."
The tide of war has shifted. The Allies have driven the Italians and Germans out of North Africa, and now they can attack fascist Europe itself by assaulting its weakest link, Italy. Their first objective, the island of Sicily. Soon the Canadian convoy meets up with 160,000 British and American troops off the western shores of Sicily and form up for the seaborne invasion, codenamed Operation Husky. But unknown to the Canadians, enemy submarines are shadowing the convoy. And in the approach to Sicily, they strike. 3 ships go down. 55 Canadians are killed. And much of the Canadians' transport is lost. More than 500 vehicles and guns. Undeterred, the men remain in high spirits.
All ranks were lighthearted, but there were some solemn moments. Before the assault, Holy Communion was held for Protestants and Catholics. And at the former service, the communion wine had to be replenished several times. I talked to the men in their mess deck, telling them of their specific jobs. The average age was about 24, although there were a number who, claiming 20, look about 18. In their shorts and open-neck rolled-up sleeve shirts, they look like a bunch of Boy Scouts. It's hard to believe that these are the assault troops, which will be the newspaper's probable description of them.
On July 9th, as final preparations for the invasion are made, a massive storm blows in, threatening the entire operation.
The afternoon of the 9th, the Scirocco, the dread gale of the Mediterranean, sprang up, and monstrous white-capped waves created uneasiness as to the success of our landings. But the winds abated, and we prepared ourselves for battle.
Early in the morning of the 10th, the storm becomes less severe, and the generals decide to go ahead with the invasion. The plan is that Allied forces, British, Canadian, and American, will land on the beaches of the southeast coast of Sicily, near the city of Pachino. Somewhere on Sicily, waiting for the Allies, are 200,000 Italian soldiers, backed by 60,000 elite German troops. As the Canadians prepare to land, the only experience they have ahead of a seaborne invasion is the bloody disaster of Dieppe, only a year before, where Canadian troops were shot down in the hundreds on the beaches as they came ashore. At 4 a.m., hundreds of ships unload thousands of tons of high explosives on the Italian and German positions in preparation for the invasion.
This is the Amber Coast in southeast Sicily. It was on this beach that 5,000 Canadian soldiers started the invasion of Sicily. The Allies were very concerned about what sort of defenses the Germans and Italians were going to put up, so they amassed a huge armada. And you can imagine 2,500 ships out there bombarding the hell out of the German positions just behind us here on the sand dunes. At 4 a.m., the Canadians made their run in. The 1st Regiment here, Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment, the Hasty Peas, landed. They were followed quickly by the Royal Canadian Regiment, Princess Pat's, Seaforce, Loyal Eddies, and the battle for Sicily was on.
The Canadian landing zone is on a stretch of beach known as the Amber Coast, just southwest of the Sicilian city of Pachino. 12 kilometers off the beaches, the men clamber into the landing craft, dangling from their transport ships. Heading for shore in a landing craft is 22-year-old Farley Mowat of the Hastings and Prince Edward Regiment.
Dawn was breaking, and a low, pale shoreline was emerging into view a mile ahead of us. I scanned that formless strip of land with agonized intensity, desperately hoping to recognize some landmark. A vast, yeasty waterspout appeared alongside and seemed to hang suspended over us. I sprinted to the edge of the ramp, shouting, "Follow me, men." and leapt off into 8 feet of water. Weighted down as I was with Tommy gun, grenades, and ammo, I went down like a stone, striking the bottom feet first. So astounded was I by the unexpected descent into the depths that I made no attempt to thrash my way back to the surface. I simply walked straight on until my head emerged.
As the men wade ashore expecting a hail of bullets, they meet only scattered resistance from a few Italian troops. 7 Canadians are killed, but there is no sign of the Germans.
The landing had gone extremely well, in fact, far better than expected. But it was clear the Germans had withdrawn, and now the Canadians were going to have to push inland to find them, and things were going to get a lot tougher.
Under a hot, brilliant Sicilian sun and temperatures of 40 degrees, the Canadians advance into a landscape of vineyards and little white houses. Tired of a war they never wanted, the Italians put up little resistance and line up to surrender. The Allied plan is to cut the Germans off before they can reach their escape route out of northeastern Sicily. But because they had lost all their vehicles at sea, the Canadians must pursue the Germans on foot.
The whole move, with troop-laden tanks grinding up the dusty road, was a nightmare. The men looked as though they'd been dipped in flour, the tanks having churned up so much chalky roadway that they had been in thick clouds of dust the whole journey.
For days, the Canadians advanced through dozens of villages, marching along dusty, twisting country roads, and there's still no sign of the Germans.
In the week following the landing, the Canadians pushed 50 miles into central Sicily. And that doesn't sound like very much, but you've got to consider the conditions. Sicily is brutally hot in the summertime, and the Canadians were advancing primarily by foot. But the real problem is the terrain, and you can see it. Sicily is all mountains and rivers and ridges, and the only way through are on windy roads, and the Germans have everyone pegged. I can't imagine how you could fight a war under these conditions.
5 days after landing, the Canadians finally meet the Germans. The crack units, the Hermann Göring and the 1st Parachute Divisions, ambush the Canadians in a number of small, violent attacks. But these are skirmishes, only meant to delay the Canadians' assault on the mountain strongholds, Leonforte, Osoro, and Agira.